as we start from the last presentation. But it might be the most interesting, so I have an honor to introduce you Elizabeth Linder from Facebook. So you have seen billion people in Facebook, but you probably have never seen living people working for Facebook. So it's first and unique time for you. Use this opportunity to ask you questions also later. Yeah, Facebook with face. Yeah. So Elizabeth, floor is yours.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you so much. Well, we are rapidly approaching the end of a very fruitful day. So I figured that we ought to end big, and that is with civilization. The author of the book Master and His Emissary, Ian McGilchrist, who is a psychiatrist with a focus on how the brain functions. I highly recommend his piece of work. Ian, in this book, focuses on the distinctions between the right and left brain. And he talks about, of course, as many of us who have heard this know, the left brain is the part of our brain that provides fact without context, numbers, algorithms, bureaucracy, rules, regulations. The right brain provides context to those facts and figures. Creativity, imagination, ideas, unbounded by rules or regulations. Now, in the abstract and without both of these halves, we have out of balance societies. We need both of these sides of our great human brains in order to create great civilizations and great societies. There have been periods in time, and this is what Ian's book argues as he travels throughout history, where civilizations have had slightly more of a right brain-driven society or slightly more of a left brain-driven society. The Renaissance being a great example of the right brain, the creativity, the imagination coming to the fore. And Ian fears that in the 21st century, we're somewhat stuck in too much of a left brain-driven context. We're sometimes so bogged down in numbers and rules and regulations and facts, but without putting context around them, that we sometimes fail to see real ideas and vision and creativity and imagination fueling the work that we do. It's my hope that what we've been talking about today, e-governance, Facebook, social media, people from all walks of life, from all cultures, coming together to exchange ideas, will potentially help to reintroduce a bit of balance back into the societies in which we live. Because what are a billion people, if not a billion very creative people? If you look at your average news feed, no matter how many friends you're connected to, it becomes a quite creative process. Videos, photos, ideas, shared and talked about and discovered, commented on, liked. However it is that we're interacting with the world, it's so interesting and it's so rich and so full when it actually comes together with so many people in one place at one time. The archaeologist and historian Professor Hale has argued, and I think many of us would agree with this, that great leaders, truly great leaders through time, actually turn outward to lead rather than turn inward. They turn outward in order to harness and grasp and use all of the ideas that come from people gathered together. What do we always do when we need an idea or when we're stuck? We talk to somebody. We bring together a group of interesting and engaging people. So as I think about leadership, which I do all the time in the political realm, politicians and government officials and diplomats and royal households are my constituents at Facebook. These are the people that I work with to help them understand how Facebook works and why they need to be part of this process in ever increasing ways. I think actually that Facebook, the technology itself, somewhat forces our leadership at the political level to turn outward, because increasingly it's almost impossible to turn inward and ignore the landscape, the social media, people-driven landscape that is enacting so much change in our societies today. And this is why I term this new era a conversational century, driven by conversational leadership. When I think back about learning about great leaders through different periods in time, I don't often think about them being described as great conversationalists. Maybe they were brave and bold. Maybe they were excellent orators. Maybe they were great innovators. But great conversationalists, the fact that they could actually talk and listen to people, that's rare. And that's a quality that I believe, through speaking to politicians and government officials about social media, we're starting perhaps in the first time in history to value so much and to take so much into account when we look at our leaders and ask them if they're doing the best possible job on our behalf when they're making decisions. Are they having conversations with us? Are they turning outward and using that incredibly robust right-hand side brain? Now, the technology, social media, social technology, Web 2.0, 3.0, is in many ways driving, I believe, conversational leadership and this conversational century. But it isn't the first time that technology has been tied so intrinsically to politics. The argument by Professor Hale has been made that actually the trireme boat used to propel the Athenian navy to far-reaching shores had a direct impact on Athenian democracy, because the construct of the boat itself required that everybody pulled their own weight and did nearly the same type of work. And when these people would get off the boats and go into their cities and their towns, they had this sense of equality amongst the people surrounding them, which influenced their view of politics. So the fact that a technology, whether it's the technology of the seas or the technology of the internet, the fact that technology can drive politics to change is by no means a new theory. It's just the theory that's come into being in our time. Now, we've been discussing so much what it is that the internet does and has an impact on our lives. A few of our most recent numbers in terms of mobile technology, which, as we all know, is very much the forefront of today's advances in e-governance. The average person who owns a smartphone, according to our numbers, will check that phone 150 times a day. And 4 out of 5 of these people will check that phone within 15 minutes of waking up in the morning. Does anybody fall into this category in the room? I certainly do. And after calling and text messaging, which traditionally are tied to, after all, a phone, Facebook is the third most utilized platform. So the scale and the scope of this is absolutely huge. Never before in civilization have this many people been connected in one space where we have this opportunity to talk to each other. If Facebook were a country, it would be the 3rd largest country in the world. And I can assure you that no one at Facebook takes that lightly. But I also think that our political leadership and our ministers and our diplomats in the government sector also needs to understand and address how potentially powerful a force this really can be. So what is going on? Are we seeing signs of conversation in leadership? Well, I think we are. And this is why I think it's so important to talk about, because if we look at the edges of those who are pushing the bounds of their usage of this technology, they're getting into the realm of conversation. Not everyone. Not everyone. Most politicians are still in the beginning phases of sharing information, that transparency movement. But the conversational movement is at the edge, is at the cutting edge, and that's what I think we're going to see more and more of. Conversations, chats with chief constables, bringing back some kind of vision where you actually know who your chief constable is. I've lived in London for the last 2.5 years. I have no idea who the people are that are keeping me safe. But thanks to the social web, these people are starting to enter into our daily lives. 1 out of the 150 times I check my cell phone today, I just might get an update from the police force that's making sure that my flat in London is safe while I'm at this conference in Estonia. Heads of state and political leaders are taking an interesting approach to introducing a bit more of conversation in their leadership in this behind-the-scenes movement that we see going on. Maybe not yet quite comfortable to just fully put down the political flags and just have free and open conversations with people. But certainly glimmers are there. You can see this is the Prime Minister of Denmark, who before her annual New Year's address, charting out the vision of what Denmark is going to be accomplishing over the next year, did a brief Facebook video to say, this is what I'm about to do. This is me behind the scenes before I do the official thing, which will be televised and put on radio and made visible in the press. This is, of course, the photo that greets people when you arrive at an airport in America, the photo that would appear in a history or textbook, and this is the photo that appears on Facebook. Barack Obama not straight on, but in a behind-the-scenes moment, in a moment that appears a bit more accessible, a bit more conversational. Prime Minister Lee of Singapore, the casual shirt look, taking a walk, meeting people, talking to people. All of this is content that our leadership at the highest levels is using to show, to prove that they're part of this new moment in leadership, that they're not always sitting in their suits and ties in their offices, but that they're also part of the greater society that's going on around them and outside of their offices. The president of Estonia, President Ilves, who we were all pleased to see this morning, often shares the articles and stories on his Facebook page that you might talk about over a morning cup of coffee as you're discussing life here in Estonia. An article about wolves in the wilderness posted to his Facebook page. Ambassador Ford, the U.S. ambassador to Syria, writes incredibly frank commentary on the U.S. Embassy Facebook page, talking without using diplomatic speak or diplomatic jargon about what it is that the U.S. position is, what the U.S. foreign policy position is in Syria directly to Syrians. And if you read these, you will find sometimes they are dramatically bold in their approach. The meme, of course, politicians who can now show that they get the joke, that they're not outside of regular society, but they're actually part of what people are spreading around the internet as these memes go global. Hillary Clinton invited the Texts from Hillary guys into the U.S. State Department in Washington, D.C. to do a real text from Hillary based off this what started as a internet joke based on this black sunglasses photo. And just a few days ago, the government house here posted this picture and this description of the maintenance man who changes light bulbs and ensures that everything in the office is working and functioning properly and correctly. In fact, according to Merritt's translation of the Estonian, one of the comments was actually, "Hey, you know, that's my dad." The ability for governments to say, well, let's just talk about how it is that we work and how it is that we operate, building that layer of transparency from the maintenance man all the way through to the preparation for a major annual speech. All of this is changing, I think, fundamentally the nature of politics in the 21st century. Now, here in Estonia, according to the Legatum Institute's Prosperity Index, 90% of the population here believes that people are treated with respect. So I think this kind of attitude that I read about here proves Estonia's success in the e-governance, in the transparent government, in 21st century politics and in that space and in that realm. Because if the fundamental belief is a belief that you treat people with respect, you can do exactly the leadership qualities we discussed at the beginning. You can turn outward. You're not paranoid about consolidating your power from the inside. You're willing to turn out to people and say, what do you think? What are your ideas? How would you approach this problem or this situation if you were sitting at this desk and not me? There has to be a willingness to take that leap. There has to be a willingness to actually trust that once in a while people will have a good idea. Maybe not even once in a while. Maybe regularly on your Facebook pages or in your Twitter feeds or in your YouTube comments. The people, the collective body of people will come up with good ideas that could fundamentally transform your society. In fact, in the book, very large book, Why Nations Fail, the argument is made that the primary indicator of a nation's falling is that the political establishment becomes too elite, so elite that it turns to tyranny. And I think many of us can think of examples when this has probably historically been true. But when I think about where we started with this idea of great leaders turning outwards, building in creativity, building in ideas, bringing in that flourishing that comes from the imaginative spirit of the right-hand brain, and combining that with the rules and regulations that are required to make a government function properly, both hand in hand, it's almost impossible to incorporate right-hand brain thinking, people-driven thinking into a narrow elite. You have to be able to turn outwards. And there has never been a period in time where turning outwards has been so incredibly easy, because we have the technology to do it. And we have the technology to do it even with a growing and expanding middle class. Because as people, as the National Intelligence Council's 2030 report shows, as people enter the middle class, one of the first things they do is get connected. So there's no limitation to the ability for people to share ideas. In the earlier days of the American political establishment, all inaugural parties were open to any American citizen who could come. But of course that number was very limited, because how many people could actually come? And a physical space can only hold so many people. So by the time we got to Andrew Jackson and the madhouse that ensued, that slowly went away. But in the world of technology, there is no limit on space. All of us can participate. All of us can have a voice. And no matter how rapidly your population is getting connected, there is room and ability to absorb those people into the political process, especially using the kinds of tools and technologies that we've talked about so much today. To prove the point further, in the United States, there are now more eligible voters on Facebook than actually vote in US elections. Now, from one point of view, that's incredibly sad. And if I were responsible for increasing voter turnout in the United States, I would take this figure very, very seriously. On the other hand, it's great potential, because what statistics show is that the good use of and the effective use of social media can actually help to put social pressure on people to be more civically engaged and politically active. So to round things off, Peggy Noonan, one of the political speechwriters from the United States, presidential speechwriter under Ronald Reagan and George Bush Sr., has written that one of the problems our politicians face today is that they start crafting and creating political narratives and push those narratives towards the people and create them in a way that they hope that people will embrace and understand. But she argues it's the other way around. The narrative of your country is being written by the people. It's written by people at home and in restaurants, in places like this, in places like the beautiful squares outside, in the summertime, outdoors, under the sun, in the wintertime, by a fire. Your narrative of your country is being written already. And if you turn inwards and you have this small elite that decides what the narrative is and pushes that out on people, then as we've seen, your power, your leadership is destined at some point to meet its end and failure. But if you're willing to actually listen, if you're willing to turn outwards, if you're willing to understand what this narrative is and capture it and grasp it and help to lead it to an even greater level of understanding or improvement or innovation, then there is a great potential for you to continue not only with your effective leadership, but to lead your society forward. And I think that it's this element of conversation, this element of two-way dialogue pushed by technology that hopefully will continue to change our societies for the better. And it's my sincere hope that Facebook at least has one small part to play in what I think is a great moment, one of the greatest moments of civilization. And that's the moment when everybody and anybody can participate, no matter where you're from or where you're going. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there any questions, comments to Elizabeth right now? No. Why? Yes.
When you have been speaking like this to political leaders, maybe across the world, I don't know, what kind of response have you experienced?
I always know the people who are going to use Facebook well and the people who are going to need a little bit of help. Because you can always see the glimmer in the eyes of people who understand what it is that I'm talking about. They're going to be the great leaders in the 21st century because they understand it. Stella from Moldova is one of those. You can tell when you watch her reaction to this message that is something that is internally understood. The ones that start shifting in their seats are the ones that you question whether this is scary and whether they are going to be able to actually adapt to it or give the impression or the show that they can adapt to it. And I hope that over time we'll have more of the former category than the latter, but there is a long way to go.
Any other questions, comments? I have a question about bad guys, meaning that not bad guys in Facebook, but meaning bad guys in the governments.
Yes.
So you advising governments, and governments definitely are able to learn how to use social media for the communication, and definitely well, endless number of good sides. But if they learn to use also Facebook, social media, and other new communication tools just to better brainwash us, is it a risk or?
It absolutely is a risk, and I think that's where civil society comes into play. And fortunately, we've been talking about this quite a bit over the course of the day. It's not just the politicians and the government officials that hear this message. It's also the people themselves, because the people are the ones that also bear a responsibility to keep our governments working towards this goal. And civil society leaders, who are fortunately now viewed by many governments like Estonia, like the United States of America, are understood to be sometimes as important as the government itself, because they're the ones who have stood up as citizens and said, we want to participate, we want to change our nations. And I think that is equally crucial to help mitigate the effect of the bad guys, who unfortunately are always going to be part of our societies and civilizations.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Yes, Yuri? Can I have a mic? Yes, because it's for a video stream.
Just a comment on the voting, that there is more voters on the Facebook than actually vote, and I think that there is one explanation for that. Some time ago, actually British scholar Stephen Coleman wrote a paper and trying to explain why actually the youth don't vote. And he compared their voting in the Big Brother program with actually how they vote in elections politics. And through serious interviews and focus groups, he discovered that actually they like voting and they vote on Big Brother because they can understand those actors and they see that they're sincere, so they vote for sincerity. And if they don't see sincerity in politics, they just don't vote. It's not that they don't like voting. They don't see any sense to vote for them. So this is something that has to be changed on the other side. It's not just getting back them to vote, and probably it won't happen that easily until the politics has changed.
I completely agree, yeah. Because sometimes what you hear actually is people saying, well, it's a choice between the lesser of two evils. But then you're not really inspired to go to the polls as if you really believe in someone or something. That makes great sense.
Thank you. Any other comments? Not yet.
Okay.
Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Elizabeth.